The bus doors hissed open, letting in a gust of chilly evening air. As people shuffled forward, their eyes fixed on their own worries. Among them was Emily, a young woman in her early 20s, wrapped in a slightly worn-out sweater. She had just finished a long shift at the diner and was eager to get home. As she dug through her purse for bus fare, her eyes caught an elderly man ahead of her, hesitating at the steps, patting his pockets with a frown. He was frail, his hands trembling slightly as he searched for coins that weren't there. The driver, already impatient, sighed loudly. "Sir, if you don't have the fare, I can't let you on." Emily didn't think twice. She reached into her bag, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and stepped forward. "I got it," she said, handing the money to the driver. The old man turned to her, his pale blue eyes wide with surprise. "You don't have to do that," he murmured, his voice raspy with age. "It's fine," Emily replied with a small smile. "Just take a seat." The man hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Thank you, miss," he whispered, before shuffling toward an empty seat near the back. Emily didn't expect anything from the gesture. It was just something she did instinctively. She had always believed that small acts of kindness mattered, even if they were forgotten the next day. As the bus rumbled forward, she leaned her head against the window, watching the blurry city. Lights passed by, her mind already drifting toward home. She barely noticed when the old man got off at his stop, but if she had, she might have seen the way he turned back for a second, watching her as if memorizing her face, a soft smile playing on his lips. Days passed, and Emily had all but forgotten the moment, until she found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. There was no name on it, just her address scribbled in careful handwriting. She frowned, turning it over in her hands before finally opening it. Inside was a neatly folded letter, the paper slightly yellowed, as if it had been kept for a long time. As she unfolded it, she had no idea that the words written inside would change everything. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was neat, but shaky, as if written by someone whose hands were not as steady as they used to be. She hesitated for a moment, then started reading. "Dear Miss, you may not remember me, but a few days ago, you paid for my bus fare. I wanted to thank you that night, but I was too overwhelmed to say much. I need you to know that your small act of kindness meant more than you can imagine. It came at a time when I had lost all hope." Emily's brows furrowed. She sat down on her couch, her eyes scanning the next lines. "That day, I had left my house with the intention of never coming back. I was heading to a place where I thought no one would miss me. My wife passed away last year, and since then, life has felt empty. My children have moved far away, and the size in house we once filled with laughter now feels like a prison of memories. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. I was invisible until you saw me." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She could picture the old man's tired face, his searching hands, the loneliness in his eyes. "You reminded me that there are still good people in this world, that maybe, just maybe, my life still has meaning." Instead of going to the place I had planned, I took that bus ride home, and for the first time in a long while, I thought about tomorrow. I am writing this letter to let you know that you saved me in more ways than you realize. I owe you more than just thanks. There was no signature, no name, just those final words, lingering on the page like an unfinished story. Emily exhaled, slowly, the weight of the letter pressing down on her. She never imagined that something so simple, just a few dollars, a moment of kindness, could have such an impact. But as much as the letter warmed her heart, it also left her restless. Who was this man? Was he really okay now? Had he found the hope he was looking for? Or was he still struggling? The next day, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to do something. But how could she? She had no name, no address, just the memory of his face. She decided to take the same bus route at the same time, hoping to see him again. As the bus rumbled along, she scanned each passenger, her heart sinking when she didn't find him. Maybe he wasn't coming back. Maybe he had moved on. Days passed, and then a week. Still, no sign of him. One evening, after another long shift, at the diner, she was locking up when she noticed an elderly man sitting on the bench outside. For a second, she thought it was him, but as she stepped closer, she realized it wasn't. The man looked lost, confused, like he wasn't sure where he was. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked gently. He looked up, startled. I think I forgot where I was going." Emily glanced at the streetlights flickering above them. The night was getting colder. "Do you have someone you can call?" He shook his head, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Something about the moment felt eerily familiar. She thought about the letter, about how easily people could slip through the cracks of life, unnoticed and unheard. "Come inside," she said. "Let's figure this out together." She helped him into the diner, poured him a warm cup of coffee, and sat with him as they tried to piece together where he lived. Eventually, with a few kind words and a little patience, the man recalled his address, and she called a cab for him. As she watched the car pull away, she realized something. That old man on the bus wasn't the only one struggling with loneliness. There were so many people, just like him, walking through life feeling unseen. Emily knew then that she couldn't just let the letter be the end of the story. She needed to find him, not just for him, but for herself too. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had to find him. That letter had changed something in her. It made her realize how many people were quietly struggling, how easily someone could slip away unnoticed. She didn't know if the old man was still out there, but she wasn't ready to let this be the end. She started taking the same bus route whenever she could, always watching the faces of the elderly passengers, hoping to recognize him. Days turned into weeks. Her hope started to fade. Maybe she had been too late. Maybe he had left town or decided not to take the bus anymore. Then, one evening, as she stepped onto the bus after her shift, she saw him. He was sitting near the window, gazing outside, lost in thought. His coat looked a little newer, his posture a little stronger. He hadn't noticed her yet. Emily's heart pounded. She took a deep breath and walked toward him. "Excuse me," she said softly. The old man turned, his eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't believe she was real. Then, a smile slowly spread across his face. "You," he whispered. "You found me." Emily sat down beside him, suddenly unsure of what to say. "I got your letter," she finally managed. "I've been looking for you." His eyes glistened. "I never thought I'd see you again," he admitted. "But I hoped I would." She hesitated before asking, "Are you okay?" He nodded, exhaling slowly. "Better than I was that night. Because of you." He paused, then added, "I realized something after writing that letter. I spent so long believing that I had nothing left, that I was just waiting for time to run out. But you made me see that there are still kind people in the world, that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She was just an ordinary person. She never thought something so simple could make such a difference. "I started going to the community center," he continued. "I met some people my age, people who understand what it's like to feel forgotten. And I'm volunteering now, helping others who are struggling the way I was." He chuckled. "Funny, isn't it? I thought I was at the end, and now I feel like I have a new beginning." Emily smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. I'm really glad, she said. You deserve that. The bus slowed as it reached the old man's stop. He looked at Emily, then hesitated before speaking again. You know, people don't realize how much a small kindness can mean. You probably didn't think twice about what you did that night. But to me, it changed everything. She nodded, understanding, now more than ever. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote something else, he said, handing it to her. Not a goodbye this time. Just something to remind you that you matter too. Emily took it, holding it carefully. Thank you. As he stepped off the bus, he turned back one last time and smiled. Take care, young lady. And never stop being the kind of person who sees people when they need it most. The doors closed, and Emily watched as he walked away, no longer the lost, hopeless man he had been that night. She unfolded the note as the bus rumbled forward. The world is a little brighter because of you. Never forget that. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, tucking the note safely into her pocket. She knew she would carry it with her always, a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could change someone's world.